Welcome back to the life of Tashmia. As always, I'm Tash, and today I'm doing a bit of a Q&A, and I'm just going to get shots on questions, so bear with me because I haven't seen these yet, so I'm just going to be answering on the fly. So just to introduce myself, I'm Tashmia. I'm a professional dominatrix. I'm also a dom coach and trainer. I'm a kink coach, and I've also got my own brand. So let's get straight into it.
How did you come up with your name?
So how I came up with Mistress Tashmia, obviously if you're a dominatrix, you might have mistress or madam or princess or whatever name in front that you like. I always liked the mistress. It just came naturally to me that. And how I came up with Tashmia is I've always loved the name Tash. I actually asked my mom when I was younger, why didn't you call me Tash? And she was a school teacher. And the reason why she didn't, she said, is because she had a girl once in her class who was really naughty and her name was Natasha. So she said there was no way in hell she was going to call me that name. And the way that Mia came from is I actually speak Italian because I used to live in Italy for quite a few years, and Mia means my. So my name means my Mistress Tash, and that's how I came up with my name.
What inspired you to become a dominatrix?
So how I kind of got into becoming a dominatrix is through one of my best friends, and she was a dom in her personal life. And she had started dating a submissive. And she just one day, we were walking along the street, literally after we went to get lunch. And she just casually said to me, do you want to double dom him with me? And I was like, I think I'd be really shit at that. Like that was my initial reaction. But it also unnerved me, and I don't get unnerved very easily. And so my reaction when things do unnerve me is actually to run towards them and not away. And so I was like, I have to try this. Like if I'm getting unnerved by this, and also because I've always been very open-minded and very open sexually and with my sexuality to try different things, there wasn't a lot that was kind of in the curious unknown to me, and this was. So I was like, hell yeah, let's give it a go. And I still remember to this day that first time that I got ready with her before we went to double dom him. And I was so excited, but I was so nervous, and I was convinced I was going to be really bad at it. But it went a very different way. We started and I just fell in love with it.
Can you share any misconceptions people might have about your profession?
There's a lot. Firstly, a lot of people think when I say I'm a dominatrix or a professional dominatrix, they just say, oh, so you bash people up for a living? Big misconception. Obviously, some people might bash people up in a scene. I don't. First, I think the biggest misconception of that part is that it's all about pain, which is not. Power dynamics is principally a mental thing and a mental state. And you can be exchanging power dynamics with someone without doing anything at all. So you don't need to be causing pain to engage in a power exchange, which I would say is the first part of that statement would imply. The second part is that when you do engage in certain BDSM activities, that it's always going to involve pain. Again, I have plenty of clients and there's so many activities that do not involve pain at all. The point is not to cause pain to someone. And I think that is just when people think of BDSM, probably because of movies and media, all we see is often impact play scenes, which is like spanking, or things where someone is screaming in pain. And so I think that's why people's brain goes straight there. I mean, we can even take spanking as a great example. Spanking can be done in a way that causes no pain. That's why we have sensual spanking versus corporate punishment. So that is a massive misconception I find when I first tell people I'm a dominatrix. Another big misconception is probably that it involves intercourse. While a dominatrix is considered a sex worker, we are working in the sexual realm a lot of the time, not always, but sometimes. Traditionally, we don't provide that service, and I personally don't. There's no judgment about dominatrixes who do, but that would be a dominatrix / an escort worker. So I think that's another big misconception have about a professional dominatrix. Also, maybe the third biggest misconception that I come across would be that I hate men, maybe, which is not true at all. I love men. I love working with men. I also have female clients and I have couple clients as well. So it's just not always men who I see. But you will see that the role of a dominatrix is not one of coming from hate. It's actually a very caring role and a very leadership role, and you're actually guiding someone through a very powerful space and through very powerful moments and emotions. So when people kind of get that wrong, that it's a very mean, aggressive point of engaging with someone, that's definitely not the case.
How do you set boundaries for yourself and the sub?
So boundaries is something that I always recommend people to think about by themselves at first. Certainly for myself, I've had to become very good at setting boundaries, not just in my work life, but in my personal life as well. And funnily enough, I found it easier in my professional life than I did in my personal life. But when you are setting boundaries for yourself, you kind of need to also, I like to think about, okay, what is limits and boundaries are very similar. What's like a hard limit, a hard boundary, something that I definitely don't want to do because it's going to cause harm to myself. Maybe that's emotionally or physically. And it's just something I'm definitely not interested in. So you can kind of think about, okay, these are the ones that I definitely don't want to do for whatever reason. And then there actually might be some limits or boundaries where I'm like, I'm a bit softer with those. They're a bit more something that it might be dependent on the person. It might be dependent on the situation. It might be dependent on me getting more comfortable with something. And then I think it's always good to kind of group them up into those two categories. When I'm working with a client, the first question I ask is injuries. The second question, actually, before we even start talking about the activities we're going to be doing that scene, the second question actually always is, what are your boundaries? What are your limits? We will discuss those. People will generally have an idea. If someone comes to me and says, I have no boundaries or limits, I take that as a bit of a red flag. That's not a safe way to play. And how I generally then will encourage them to share them is I will give them some examples of mine. But how you kind of come up with your own and encourage someone else's is to kind of get them to sit down and think about, what are the things that I'm not cool with? What are the things that they're just a no-go zone for me?
It's a big energy transaction. How do you look after yourself? What is your aftercare?
Aftercare, interestingly, starts before the scene for me. And that is getting my head in the right space. Even my clients do this. I had one of my regular clients last night and I checked in with him in the afternoon. And I loved what he replied to me is like, I'm just taking the time because I've been at work all day. So I'm taking the time to get into my headspace for our session. And it's so important that both of you do this before a session or play, not just professionally, but even in your personal life. And for me, that looks like getting to my studio early. I don't like to get to my studio and be rushed and my clients coming and I have to throw on clothes or decide what I want to wear. I want to get them with plenty of time if I can. I love to do a meditation or an activation and really lock in with the energy I want to embody for that session. So getting my head in the right mind frame is going to help me for afterwards, because if I'm in the right mind frame from a session, the session is going to go better. And then from that, my aftercare is going to be easier because I'm going to be feeling better about how the session went. But definitely like my aftercare will depend on the type of session it is and the intensity level of the session. Some scenes just are more intense and it doesn't actually mean more intense physically necessarily. It could just be that might be something that draws a lot more out of you emotionally for whatever reason. It's very different for everyone given their history and given their past. So if it's not such an intense session, it might just like this is always the case, as soon as a session ends, the way I signify the end of a scene is I decolor my sub as long as they're fine to be colored up. And my energy switches. So I come out of that kind of leadership facilitation dom role and I go quite soft with them, and I make sure that the energy level just calms back down because we've just had the climax of the scene. So I'm trying to bring the energy back down. I'm maybe placing a hand on the back of my client or submissive. I'm leading them to the shower where they can have a nice warm shower, get changed in their clothes, and we have a discussion. And while this might be seen as aftercare for them, it actually is also aftercare for me because it's switching my energy back down. It's getting the feedback from my submissive or my client, because I need that feedback too. I need to know how it went, what things I like maybe didn't go so well, what things I could improve on, because for me, that helps to get that feedback and to kind of come back down to earth. Then once they kind of leave, I myself will just literally take off my latex, my boots, everything, and I'll clean up like that. I'll just start cleaning up, which I actually find is quite a cathartic experience to clean up the space and make it all neat and tidy again. And then I'll have a nice warm shower and I will think about kind of the energies that I might have accumulated during the session being washed off myself. And then I'll get into some really nice, cozy, comfy clothes. And then I might recenter myself. If it's been a bit more of an intensive session, I might even do another meditation if I feel I really need to. And then I will leave my studio, and me leaving the studio is in itself a step of aftercare because that's when I re-enter the world and that's when I re-enter myself, if that makes sense.
It's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
How you do all this aftercare after your work, but no one really does that when you're working in an office.
Yeah.
You might have had a really shit day at the office, but no one does actually actively ever clean themselves or their energy's off.
And, you've got the same amount of energy being built up in an office. I mean, you're working with so many different people, especially if you're in a busy, I used to work corporate for over a decade. And the amount of different energies I would encounter on that day and have to absorb and have to manage is a lot. And then you're expected to kind of just switch off. It's no wonder that people come home and they kind of take it home, take it out on their partners, because they've not given that right to decompress and get out of that. We all have a work face. No matter what job we do, we all have that work persona when we step into that office, which is, your studio for better words. And to be expected to go from like that work persona to the wife, the husband, the partner, the boyfriend, the girlfriend, the mother, the father, the whatever, there's a transition that needs to happen. And in the vanilla world, let's say, we're not given the grace to do that.
So true. I'm excited to use this. What excites you most about your world?
The thing I get fed back the most, especially recently, I've noticed this because, as I mentioned in another episode, I recently joined a vanilla dating app as opposed to my normal kink one. And the biggest feedback, because obviously people, like the first question, people are like, what do you do? And they're like, oh my gosh, I love how passionate you are about what you do. And actually people have said that just from looking at, for example, my Instagram. They said the passion that you have for what you do comes across. And so I think that is the number one thing. I love the fact that I'm passionate about what I get to do because that was my dream for so many years. And when I was in corporate, and I can remember this so clearly. And I remember having a conversation with my daughter's father. I remember exactly where Rock was. They're on the rocks near Fairlight Beach if you're in Sydney. And we're having this conversation because I was doing my master's in business at the time. And I was pregnant. It was before my daughter was born. And we're having this discussion once again about my career, because obviously I was very successful to society's terms, well, society's standards at what I did. I earned a lot of money doing it. I was good at it, but I wasn't passionate about it. And all I ever wanted for some reason, I just remember this always being a need in me, is I wanted to be passionate about what I do. I wanted to wake up in the morning with like a sprite in my step, passionate about what I was going to do that day. While I was waking up, I remember I'd always wake up, I had my alarm go off at like 5:15, so I would get up and like go to the gym or go on my run, get to the office. Like, it was just mundane, rinse and repeat every day, and I wasn't happy about it, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I did my master's of business, and I thought during that some like amazing idea was going to like bing in my head, and I'd be like, that's what I meant to do. And then as I was in the last year of that course, when I was it was the second last year, so that was when I was pregnant. The last year I actually had my daughter. Like, no Bing had started. I was about to go into the last year of it, and I was getting a bit worried that like I haven't come up with this amazing business idea that I was going to be so passionate about. And it didn't come. It didn't come during that at all. I finished my master's, I had my daughter, and it wasn't until I think maybe my daughter was 1. I had split from her dad by that point, and I was with my friend, and I just happened to fall into it. And it was just that chance meeting and that chance conversation with someone who's now one of my best friends that I found my passion. So I guess number one thing about what that I love about what I do is I'm so passionate about it. And secondly, the authenticity that it allows me. I'm allowed to live a very authentic way. It's very incongruent with my values and my beliefs. I've always been someone who's huge on self-development and self-growth. I do it personally. I have always had my own therapist. I'm always looking to better myself, to learn. And what I do, I believe, is facilitate that for other people as well, so that they can be the best version of themselves as well. So I find it quite an honor to be able to not only live authentically and do that, but also give that to other people so that they can live a better life. They can live a more authentic selves. Because when people come to me, they are taking everything off. And I don't just mean clothes. I mean, they are taking off the mask they wear in their everyday lives. And I'm seeing the bare bones of who they really are. And it's so beautiful. And it's such a privilege. And it's very rare that you get to share that with people.
What advice would you give someone who'd like to dip into the world of BDSM?
First thing would be learn how to communicate. I harp on about communication so much with BDSM and the kink world. Anyone who's in it, you will generally find is an extremely good communicator, because you need to be. So if you want to go into BDSM and kink, the first thing I would actually tell you to do is work on your communication skills. It seems a little strange to say, why wouldn't I start researching what I'm interested in? That comes next, I would say. First, learn about how you can communicate your own needs and wants. Learn how you can listen to someone. Learn how you can negotiate with someone. Learn how you can communicate and set your own boundaries with someone else. So all the things that make you a good communicator, I would say do that first, because they are the bones of being able to step inside the BDSM and kink world. Next, if you're exploring by yourself, or even if you do have a partner, I would say then maybe start looking at the different activities or the different kinks that you might be interested in. There is so much available online to us now. You can like Google anything you want, and then maybe see what things interest you and do a bit of research on them. Maybe take a course, maybe get some training, maybe talk to a kink coach so you can get yourself properly informed. Before you actually engage in any activities, make sure you do your homework and research. Don't just jump into it. If you are doing it with a partner, obviously you've got another level added in that you're going to have to communicate about this interest to someone. Slow and steady is my recommendation with this. If you're kind of introducing it to your partner, which you've never really expressed a desire in BDSM or kink before, I would say, first of all, make sure you're addressing it at a time where it's not like dinner time with the kids or you're about to watch your favorite TV show or whatever it is. Make sure it's like time and space that you guys have to chat and it's relaxed. And then I would just kind of bring it up very casually, like, it could be, oh, have you seen such and such show? Or, the other day when you were, bossing me to put the kid's bike in the car, I kind of like, you could bring it up in quite a playful manner and kind of test the waters and see what their reaction is to it. I would never take their first reaction as the be all and end all, because sometimes something has to sit with someone. So even if, some people will have a positive reaction, especially if you've got that type of relationship. And then even if it is a positive reaction, I wouldn't go too far into like everything that you've been researching and like every deep fantasy you've ever had. I'd leave the conversation and then readdress it in a couple of days and pick it up from there. If your partner doesn't give you the best reaction, I would let it again stew with them for a few days, because they might go away and think, I didn't really love the way I handled that or reacted to that, which happens a lot of the time. And then you could, in a couple of days, check in with them, even if they don't bring it up. You know how we had that discussion a couple of days ago, I was kind of interested in exploring XYZ. I was just wondering if you had some more time to think about how you felt about it. If there is a negative reaction still, I would start asking why, because sometimes it's misconceptions that give people their reactions. They might say, well, I'm not really into pain. Very common misconception. Well, that's where you could explain, well, actually there's a lot of activities in kink and BDSM which require no pain at all. And that's when you can start to discuss boundaries and limits, things that they might be interested in exploring and things that they might not be. You could also ask them to put it on a scale. I've heard of this before, which I thought was a great idea. If interest is 0, put it at 1. If your interest is like, I can't wait to try this, put it at 10. Where on the spectrum are you sitting with your interests? So it kind of gets them away from having to say yes or no. They could be like, I'm at a 6, like maybe a bit towards like I could be interested, but they're not having to be like, it's a hell yes. So that's another helpful way. If you're getting to the third conversation and the person is still adamantly like, no way, I think this is where you're going to have to go away and have a bit of a think about how you want to address this and how much it is important to you as a person and in your life. I've seen a lot of people deny their desires due to partners, and why I would never want to judge someone else's partnership, because there might be many more other reasons for that partnership. It is something you're going to have to examine and decide for yourself. People do come up with compromises, such as seeing a professional dominatrix. That has been one I know of people have made in the past. So yeah, there's a few ways to kind of dip your toe into it and get into it, depending, if you're single or with someone else. But, start slow and start soft. I say that for everything, including how to get into stuff, and just see how you go.
Last question. What type of training do you offer?
So I offer quite a few. I originally started training other DOMs. I fell into that originally a few years ago when I was doing professional sessions with clients' partners. So some clients would have a partner, or especially new partners they were kind of getting brought into it. And so I started training them, and I would also go out to dinners and things, and people would say, what do you do? And I would get a lot of, especially females, coming up to me saying, I would love to learn how to do that. And that's when I came up with my How to Be a Dom course, which is an online course that anyone can take. And because I always wondered, why don't people know how to do this? Or where's the access issue? And what came back to me is people didn't know where to go to get trained, for starters. They just, if you're not in the community, I think it's quite hard to know where to go. Secondly, they weren't feeling the two things I always come back to is you need to feel confident and you need to feel capable. And confidence comes from something you can learn within yourself. Capable is the actual, I feel capable to do such an activity, or I feel capable to perform a scene. So there's two aspects, and that's how I really like to address my training is I want someone to feel confident in themselves, and that can be a bit different for everyone. And I also want them to feel capable in what they're doing. So I like to combine those two aspects. So my training focuses on that in my course. I also do one-to-one dominatrix training where I've trained professional dominatrixes. I'm training a couple now, actually. I've just finished one and I'm about to start someone else. And that is a little bit more in depth and also can take a bit of a different form because you have to learn the business side of it too. And then I also offer one-to-one kink coaching, and that can be with anyone who's in kink. You don't need to identify as a dom. You don't need to identify as a submissive. You may identify as those things. You might identify as a switch, so there's someone that goes between the both. But it could just be to help you on your kink journey. We generally will establish what goals are you trying to achieve in your kink journey, and then we will come up with a plan and how are we going to get to those goals, and then we will have sessions and a coaching plan on to achieve those goals. Yeah. So thank you everyone for watching. I had a lot of fun doing the Q&A, so thank you for that. And as always, stay kinky.